The world wakes up to shocking headlines. Russia threatens new missile strikes, sending waves of fear and uncertainty across the globe. Governments convene emergency meetings. Markets react with panic. Ordinary people check their phones for updates, hoping for reassurance but finding none. For more up-to-date information and instant notification, do not forget to comment whether you have subscribed to the video or not. Reports flood in. Russian officials have issued stark warnings about an escalation in missile deployments. The term IRBM, Intermediate-Range Ballistic Missile, dominates every news channel. Experts describe them as fast, precise, and nearly unstoppable. The question on everyone's mind is, where will they strike next? Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a shift is taking place behind closed doors. In Washington, D.C., high-ranking officials file into a secure underground chamber. A classified meeting is underway. Military advisors, intelligence chiefs, and senior policymakers sit around a long, dimly lit table. The room buzzes with urgency. The president listens carefully as one advisor declares, "We can no longer rely on deterrence alone. It's time to revise the doctrine." What follows is a decision that will send shockwaves around the world. The United States announces a historic shift in its nuclear doctrine. No more vague policies. No more ambiguous, strategic patience. This new doctrine is clear, direct, and unmistakable, a signal to adversaries that any attack could trigger an overwhelming response. Tensions rise. International allies express concern. Rival nations issue statements filled with condemnation and defiance. The world's most powerful countries are now locked in a dangerous game of brinkmanship, with one wrong move threatening to spark a catastrophic chain of events. As missiles are loaded onto launchers in undisclosed Russian locations, satellite images leak to the public. They show stark images of missile silos being uncovered and launch platforms being prepared. Journalists analyze every frame, speculating on Russia's next move. "Is this a warning or a countdown?" asks one news anchor with a tone of dread. Suddenly, a global alert. A siren blares in a European city. False alarm, but it doesn't feel that way to the people who hear it. Panic spreads like wildfire. In every corner of the world, people ask the same haunting question. Is this the start of something bigger? The eyes of the world are locked on two nations, both armed with unimaginable firepower, both unwilling to back down. Leaders issue statements of strength. Newsrooms go into overdrive. Social media explodes with fear, speculation, and demands for peace. The story is still unfolding. No one knows how it will end. But one thing is clear, the world is standing on the edge of something it hasn't seen in decades. And this time, there may be no turning back. Across the world, governments scramble. Emergency meetings are called in NATO command centers. Ambassadors are summoned. World leaders issue carefully worded statements, calling for calm but offering no concrete solutions. In major European capitals, citizens prepare for the worst. Emergency drills are suddenly scheduled in schools. Sirens blare for testing purposes, but everyone knows what it really means. Is this the start of a new Cold War? Asks a reporter standing in front of a sea of protesters in Berlin. Placards call for peace, not war, as worried citizens march through the streets. But this time, it feels different. This time, it feels real. The Situation Room. Far from the cameras and crowds, something even more consequential is taking place in Washington, D.C. Deep beneath the White House, behind layers of security, America's most powerful officials gather in the Situation Room. The air is tense. Advisors, military chiefs, and intelligence officers brief the president. Russia is not bluffing, says a grim-faced general, pointing at a satellite image of a missile convoy moving through a forested area. They've mobilized launch systems in at least 3 locations. Our estimates suggest they could be operational within 48 hours. The room falls silent. The weight of the moment is suffocating. Eyes turn to the president. Decisions must be made, and there's no room for error. A national security advisor breaks the silence. If they think we'll hesitate, they'll keep pushing. We have to send a message, one they can't ignore. Another official raises an alternative. A message, yes, but it has to be strategic. If we overreact, they'll escalate. If we underreact, they'll walk all over us. We need to find the balance. The president leans forward, hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the map before them. After a long pause, a decision is made. one that will shape the future of global security. Announce it. A new nuclear doctrine. Hours later, the world is stunned by a historic press conference from the White House. The president steps up to the podium, his face hard with resolve. Cameras flash. Microphones record every word. The entire world is listening. For too long, we have relied on ambiguity to maintain deterrence. Today, that changes. The president's voice is steady but firm. The United States will no longer wait for a threat to become a crisis. Our new doctrine is clear. Any act of aggression with nuclear-capable weapons will be met with a response that is swift, decisive, and absolute. Panic spreads through newsrooms and social media like wildfire. The term swift, decisive, and absolute is repeated on every major outlet. Nuclear analysts call it the boldest shift in U.S. nuclear policy since the Cold War. Debates rage on TV panels. Does this make us safer, or does it make war more likely? Asks one anchor. No one has a clear answer. But while the world debates, Russia reacts. Its foreign ministry calls the U.S. doctrine a provocation of the highest order. Within hours, Russian officials announce an equivalent countermeasure. No one knows what that means, but everyone fears they will soon find out. The ticking clock. In military bases around the world, soldiers prepare for high alert status. Fighter jets are fueled and ready. Submarines carrying nuclear payloads quietly slip beneath the waves, their locations unknown to all but a select few. Reports of cyber attacks targeting power grids in Eastern Europe surface, though no one claims responsibility. Is this just a coincidence? Asks one skeptical reporter. The unfolding crisis. In a small apartment in Warsaw, a mother watches the news while packing a go bag for her children. Water, food, batteries, all essentials for a potential evacuation. Her eyes stay fixed on the screen as she stuffs the bag. Her daughter, too young to understand the headlines, tugs at her sleeve. "Mom, are we going on a trip?" the child asks innocently. The mother forces a smile and nods. "Yes, sweetie. Just a little trip. Just in case." Across the Atlantic, a retired veteran in Texas flips through TV channels, unable to settle on one. "I've seen this before," he mutters to himself, remembering the drills he practiced during the Cold War. He watches as a general on TV explains mutually assured destruction to the public, as if it were a new concept. "This ain't new," he says, switching off the TV. But it never gets easier to watch. Behind the curtain. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin holds a closed-door meeting with his inner circle. His generals brief him on the U.S. shift in policy. He listens without interrupting, then stands and walks toward the window, gazing out at the city skyline. His reflection stares back at him, eyes cold and calculating. "They think they can scare us," he says quietly, as if speaking to himself. "They have no idea what's coming." He turns to his advisors, his voice louder, sharper. "Mobilize the reserve units. Full readiness. No delays." Back at NATO headquarters, a general receives a classified report. The headline reads, "Russian forces now at DEFCON 2 equivalent." A wave of anxiety washes over him. DEFCON 2 is one step below nuclear war. "It's happening," he whispers under his breath, knowing he's one of the few people on Earth who understands what that truly means. The world on edge. Protests grow larger. Supermarkets see a sudden spike in sales of non-perishable foods. Airports fill with passengers trying to flee major cities. Hashtags like #WW3 and #nuclear standoff trend on social media. Conspiracy theories flood forums. This is just a distraction. This is all planned. They've been preparing for this for years. Despite the noise, one truth rises above it all. The world is closer to the brink than it has been in decades. The final warning. Back on TV, the camera cuts to the Secretary General of the United Nations as he delivers an emotional plea. "There is still time to stop this," he says, almost begging. "We have seen this road before, and it leads to devastation. The only victory is peace." His words echo across the world. But will anyone listen? That night, in a small town in Japan, an elderly survivor of Hiroshima sits alone, watching the broadcast. Tears roll down his weathered face as he sees the same mistakes being made all over again. "They don't know," he whispers to no one. "They don't know what it's like." What happens next? With missile launchers active, warships on the move, and nuclear submarines vanishing into the depths, the world stands on a knife's edge. Every second feels heavier than the last. Every moment could be the one that changes history. The next move could be the last. And no one knows who will make it. Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment and subscribe and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we have breaking news coming from inside of the United States of America, as we've been able to hear the United States Armed Forces doctrine on nuclear deterrence has been modified recently to counter the Russian threat that has been conducted through the Intermediate-Range Ballistic Missile launch from just last night. We have been able to hear additional news as well that the United States government believes that the Russian Federation only has a limited number of these intermediate-range ballistic missiles, and does believe that currently the Russian Federation does not possess the ability to start mass attacks inside of Eastern Europe with these forms of intermediate-range ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, inside of the Russian Federation we have been able to hear that Putin does claim that they have more weapons of the Arctic variety ready to launch at any given moment, and also they have made the claim that they will be firing more Arctic inside of combat service here in the immediate future. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that the conflict has been escalating in other means and in other scales, as we've been able to hear, according to Ukrainian intelligence, the arrival of more North Korean soldiers inside the area of the Harry Volblast, and also North Korean engineers inside the city of Marip. We're not exactly sure the reason for the North Korean engineers arriving in Marip, as the last time North Korea constructed anything was about 60 years ago, but nevertheless it does appear that North Korean engineers are currently in the area at this very moment. Meanwhile, inside of Kirov, the battles rage that have been continuing to rage across the entirety of the Eastern Front as the Russian Federation tries to drive way through the main highway, the N15, and into the town of Kirov itself today, bombing the now empty thermal power plant that was in the western side of the small town that has been largely unoccupied for about 2 years, attempting to destroy what may become a major defensive structure in the future. Meanwhile, we've also been able to see some more video and picture evidence emerging from the Marino Storm Shadow missile attack, where we were able to see a Storm Shadow rocketing his way across the countryside, apparently completely undetected by Russian air defense. At the time the video was made, we have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have been eyeballing the THAAD of the terminal high-altitude air defense system to be able to try and counter the incoming Russian intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which apparently will be fired several more times into Ukraine. According to the Russian statements, we've also been able to hear a statement that the Verona Rada session has been cancelled today as well due to direct threats and fears that the Ukrainian Verona building, equivalent to the US Congress building, will be attacked and destroyed by Russian conventional fire. We have loads of news to cover today, and moving on into our most important piece of news that we have coming from the United States, we were able to hear that the United States nuclear readiness is being heightened, according to a direct statement today by the United States Department of Defense. The in increased heightiness of nuclear deterrent strategy includes the B-61-12 gravity bombs delivered by aircraft, as well as the enhanced readiness of nuclear-armed and powered Ohio-class submarines, and several other kinds of strategic deterrents to the United States of America possesses at its disposal to be able to deal with any nuclear threat. It does appear that while in the foreground many people are considering the nuclear actions, well, the possible nuclear actions with the launch of the Intermediate-Range Ballistic Missile, the Ares-NI, yesterday by the Russian Federation to largely be nothing more than a bit of a warning, or more so of a scare tactic. It does appear that the United States is taking appropriate precautions in the meantime to be able to deal with the situation, and to ensure that the Russian Federation understands the United States nuclear readiness is going to be at a heightened pace, and also ready to match whatever the Russian Federation may be doing here in the near future. At the exact same time, we've also been able to hear that Russia only has a few of the Arctic missiles, according to the United States Department of Defense, and the United States does believe that the Russian Federation does not possess a large or a very well fleshed out ability to be able to use the Arctic intermediate-range ballistic missiles. From what we understand, the Arctic intermediate-range ballistic missiles are a modification of the RS-26, which has been in service with the Soviet Union, and then further on the modern day Russian Federation. For some, while we are anticipating that most Arctic missiles are most likely a slightly modernized version of the RS-26, and for this reason the Russian Federation may not have any Arctic in incredibly large number, but they may actually have a decent amount of RS-20SXS at their disposal that simply have not been upgraded. Here in the near future, at the exact same time, we've also been able to hear that Russia only has a few of the Arctic missiles, according to the United States Department of Defense, and the United States does believe that the Russian Federation does not possess a large or a very well fleshed out ability to be able to use the Arctic intermediate-range ballistic missiles. From what we understand, the Arctic intermediate-range ballistic missiles are a modification of the RS-26, which has been in service with the Soviet Union and then further on the modern-day Russian Federation. For some, while we are anticipating that most Arctic missiles are most likely a slightly modernized version of the RS-26, and for this reason the Russian Federation may not have any Arctic in incredibly large number, but they may actually have a decent amount of RS-20 SIXS at their disposal that simply have not been upgraded to the modern ARNIC pattern. We have also been able to hear that at the exact same time in Moscow, the Russian Federation continues to claim that they have even more weapons like it, and we can also see this in statement from Putin today, which we'll be playing right here. But that's the end of the clip right there, nevertheless insisting that more nuclear weapons such as these or more intermediate-range ballistic missiles that are nuclear capable to make sure that we clarify that correctly are available for use, and according to additional statements we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is claiming that they will continue to fire ARNIC missiles in combat for the foreseeable future, meaning that the Ukrainians will now have to contend with dealing with and shooting down all arresting missiles that are fired with some sort of combat capability sometime in the future. From what we understand, the Ukrainian armed forces does consider this to be a major strategic threat, and of course if these were armed with conventional warheads, that may very well be the case. We have seen that the Ukrainians have requested that they may want a THAAD launcher or THAAD launchers to be able to protect their skies. However, there are major issues with this involved. One, the TH is the newest air defense system inside of the United States of America, and for this reason the TH is a matter of national security to protect the technological, I guess you could say advancements or the proprietary technological abilities that the THAAD launcher and the THAAD missiles have. Currently there are no THAAD launchers in the world that are outside of the U.S. Armed Force possession. Any THAAD launchers that are inside the state of Israel, or for that matter inside of East Asia, are all currently deployed and used by the United States Army, and the remaining 4 that are inside of the United States are all inside of Texas, once again under the command of the United States Army. For this reason we highly expect that this request is pretty much falling on deaf ears. There is absolutely no way possible that the United States is going to completely forego its proprietary knowledge, its proprietary technology, and also the billions of dollars that we spent in about a decade developing this air defense system to hand it over immediately to the Ukrainians, and possibly put all of that investment to at risk or completely wash it away somehow, some way. The Ukrainians, however, are not entirely out of luck if they were to be attacked with an intermediate-range ballistic missile. In the areas of Eastern Europe there are, and also around the world, there is a certain kind of an air defense system called the AGIS Ashore Ballistic Missile Defense Systems. These are very interesting sort of a defense system, as they largely are operated by the United States Navy, and have an exceptionally long range using the SM-3 service to missiles. These complexes have a range of nearly 950 to 1,000 mil, with these missiles being capable of intercepting intermediate range and even intercontinental ballistic missiles during their boost and terminal phases. We do not believe that the Aegis of Shore would be able to intercept an IRBM or an ICBM with its MV or MARV in any sort of a post-boost or mid-course phase, as the system may be traveling too quickly at that point. However, if we're being concerned about the area of Eastern Europe and the launches from the Russian Federation over the Atlantic and towards European countries or the United States, the AGIS ASUR systems actually provide a great deal of nuclear defense, at least in the areas of Eastern Europe where these missiles would first be launched, and would be in some form of a boost or a terminal phase. These systems also have a range of 950 miles, and based off the location of the Aegis of Shore system inside of Romania, this system is able to quite literally cover the entirety of Ukraine with its firing arc, meaning that if an actual nuclear weapon was to be fired in Ukraine, we probably would see that the AIS Shore system inside of Romania would be deployed to be able to deal with the incoming threat to Ukraine and largely shoot down the system. We do believe that at that point diplomatically the West would consider using direct force of arms, such as the use of an AGIS of Shore in a defensive manner in the support of the state of Ukraine, considering that the Russians would at this point be using a nuclear weapon. And for this reason we are also assuming that the Ukrainians would not need a THAAD for this reason, because simply the matter of fact is there is already an air defense system that the United States possesses that will easily be able to cover the entirety of the airspace of Ukraine. And for that reason requesting of that is largely mute. Not only that, we would also have to completely throw away security interests as well to give them one, and on top of that the amount of training time required for the Ukrainians to be able to operate and field one of these THAAD systems properly would be somewhere around a year, meaning that by the time the THAAD was actually used in Ukraine it would be long past the threat that we're currently seeing right now. And for this reason we do believe that the Ukrainians will not be getting a THAAD system from the United States of America anytime soon, and this is more so wishful thinking by the Ukrainians to believe that there is even a proper request to be able to get it at. Nevertheless, we are going to be moving on into some more news that we've been able to hear, that while the Ukrainians do not have that, and they have the Patriot, which is the next best thing, and of course, really the only air defense system that is as advanced and capable as it is in the world, that is used by multiple countries. We have been able to hear that apparently the Verona our session has been cancelled today inside of Kyiv due to threats and fears that the Russian Federation is going to directly bomb the Verona building with some sort of missile strike or A drone strike. We've been hearing this for the past day, and it does appear that considering that the Russian Federation has now attacked with an IRBM the city of Dino, it's not entirely impossible to say that the Russian Federation may now attempt an attack on the Verona building to once again send a stronger message to Ukraine, and for this reason the Verona session has been cancelled, at least at the moment. It does also appear that the Ukrainians may have a decent reason to believe that the Verona Rada building is going to be stricken, as we've been able to hear some concerning information today outside of London, as we've been able to hear that inside of the city of London an explosion has occurred very close to the US Embassy somewhere on a street just nearby. According to information that we've gotten from the Metropolitan Police, they have found a suspicious package near the building, cordoned off the area, and then conducted a controlled explosion of the package to remove it from the nearby perimeter of the US Embassy. From what we understand, the US Embassy is largely a fairly protected compound, as we can see the US Embassy in London right here. And to try and show you all a better picture of it from a distance, and let me see if we can get a picture such as this, the embassy does have a larger security perimeter around it, but nevertheless a possible bomb being somewhere in the area of 9 Elms Lane and also apparently 9 Elm Street, as well as a bit of a concern. We do not know the exact location of the bomb at the moment, or the suspicious package that was remotely detonated, but nevertheless it was somewhere on 9 Elms Lane, just to the north of the US Embassy of London, and pretty much skirting along the River Thames. It may have been a little ways down somewhere near the apartment blocks that are New Union Square, or they may have even been further down towards this new construction that we're seeing here on the satellite imagery. Nevertheless, it was incredibly close to the US Embassy. From what we heard, it may have been some sort of a possible threat given by the Russian Federation that the United States and the United Kingdom may be under some form of threat, in at least a symbolic form. We are going to be waiting to see if we can get any additional information on this bombing, or what was actually in the suspicious package, because at the moment it seems to be a very concerning incident, possibly relating to United States Embassy and one of national security interest, but nevertheless we do not know a large amount of details, at least publicly at this moment, that have been issued by the Metropolitan Police, and for this matter we will just have to simply wait and figure out what actually happened at the US Embassy sometime in the future. Nevertheless, that does not mean that things are not happening at this moment on the ground inside of Ukraine, as we have been able to hear of major developments that are still going on the ground. And to bring you all back once again just one day ago to the massive Storm Shadow attack that happened at Marino, we were able to see that storm shadows were seen flying on their way into the region, which y'all can see right here, and check this out, and there it, applause, goes, and there goes a couple of others. Actually, those were the very missiles that would end up slamming down into the military complex at Marino, and apparently wounding and killing a large amount of a Russian general staff, and also grievously wounding several North Korean officers as well that were inside of the compound. From what we understand, the Ukrainians will most likely be using the Storm Shadow and attack them in the future to target more Russian locations. And we are also expecting as well that the Russian Federation will continue to escalate in response for every single time the Ukrainians use an attacks or a Storm Shadow. The reason why the Russians are going to be escalating in response to every single time the Ukrainians are using the Storm Shadow or attack HIMS is that the Storm Shadow is quite literally impervious to Russian air defense, considering that it is a low visibility missile and largely undetectable on Russian radar. And also the attack HIMS missiles, while not being low visibility at all, and they light up a radar like a Christmas tree, we have seen that the Russian air defense has a very difficult time trying to shoot those down, and so for this reason, every single time the Ukrainians use these weapon systems, it is a guaranteed head on whatever that Russian strategic target they were trying to destroy is, and for this reason the Russian Federation panics, and may even weep behind the scenes for each and every single one of these attacks that are conducted, once again showing that the Russian Federation's armed forces are a lot weaker than one would actually think, at least according to what we always saw on paper. Moving on from that, and into the Belgrade region. Though and actually into Khark, we were able to hear some concerning news that North Korean troops have been spotted inside of Ukraine's eastern Khark region, according to a spokesperson for the Ukrainian military. And this is the first ever time that we've actually seen North Korean troops outside of the Russian Federation and the K Oblast. This is the first time that they've ever actually been seen inside of Ukraine and inside of active frontline fighting anywhere within the actual contested areas of the front line in Ukraine. While you're not really sure what this is showing, this may be showing that the Russian Federation is starting to grip with manpower wasses quite literally anywhere and everywhere across the front line, or it may show that the Russian Federation has requested the North Koreans change their agreement to only use the North Koreans inside of the Russian Federation for security purposes, and now they're being allowed to be used inside of Ukraine. But in exchange the North Koreans get more valuable materials such as oil, food, or maybe even further weaponry like air defense systems, to be able to continue to work towards their own national Interests, this doesn't mean that this is the only place that we've heard, according to Ukrainian intelligence, that the North Koreans have been spotted, as we've also been able to hear that apparently North Korean are also being spotted inside of the area of Marib. We're not exactly sure what is going on with the North Grain inside of Marib. They may be trying to get an idea of how to conduct larger civil engineering constructions, considering that due to the massive social restructuring that happened in NR in 1990 inside of North Korea during the March of Suffering, which is their Great Famine, where Kim Il-sung, actually Kim's died, Kim Jong-il took over, and Kim Jong-il brought forward the Sununa social system, which meant that the North Korean military was largely responsible for moving the nation forward. This may be a continuation of that under Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un may be allowing certain contingents of the North Korean technical advisors and engineering staff to be able to travel to Marib to try and get some ideas on how to conduct modern levels of civil engineering, and also a building development. That may be the case because we really don't know any other good reason as to why the North Korean engineers and technical advisors would be inside of Marib, but nevertheless they are there at the moment. We were also able to see a very interesting instance in the southern front line of BRK where the Russians had bombed the Kurov thermal power plant, which had been out of use for some time considering its proximity to the front line, but it does appear that the Russians are already dropping some incredibly large ordnance onto the facility, trying to make sure that it completely destroys its fighting abilities or defensive abilities in the future if the Battle of Kurov was to ever actually coalesce into a major street battle. We can see that the bomb actually hit one of the main stacks of the thermal power plant, and it appears that the stack has completely collapsed, and that's what most of the dust and debris is coming from. We're not exactly sure why they struck one of the smokestacks or one of the, I guess you could say dischargers, or I guess you could say a thermal vent of the thermal power plant. We're not entirely sure why they did that. Maybe they were trying to destroy some sort of a defensive post in there, mines or something along those lines, but we really do not understand why exactly they took that action. Nevertheless, that is largely all the news that we have today, and I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. And if you all have enjoyed, please make sure to consider us subscribing. We really love to see when people subscribe. It makes us incredibly happy. YouTube doesn't really care, but we care a great deal, and so if you do subscribe, thank you very much. Also, if you have made it this far into the video and you want to let me know that you've made it to this point in the video, and good job if you have, please make sure to put down in the comments below ABDO, that is ABADO Abido, put that down in the comment section below to let me know that you made it to this point in the video, because I do go through and read the comments, and it makes me laugh a lot whenever I see people putting the same thing over and over and over, and also it's great to know that all of y'all made it to the end of the video as well. And also, if you really did like this video, and also you like me telling you to put a Bido in the comments section, make sure to hit the like button as well, because that helps these videos to reach more folks, and lets them actually know what the news is going on in the world today. And so that thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.